Um, Here we go. So this is what we've been working on for some time now. Um, Josh and I together both started having these conversations about why is it that you can't just search Google for that passage of the Talmud that has a great story that you love, or that midrash that you might have heard referenced. You remember a few words of. They're not up online. A lot of these texts. You can find, Tanakh in lots of different places online, but that's just the beginning of our textual tradition. Right? That's the foundation. We have a lot more. We have a lot more layers of text. These really deserve to be available for everyone for free. And I think, as Aharon certainly agrees, his work with the Open Siddur Project, they need to be licensed in such a way that they're reusable. They shouldn't just be a proprietary site for one particular company or one particular institution. We need to build the infrastructure that anyone can build on top of, that can be reusable for new kinds of projects. So we've started building what started as a demo and has sort of evolved into really a platform for showing this off, for trying to say, what does it look like if you have the entire textual tradition at your fingertips? What if it's interconnected? What if that Mikrot Gedolot is not just 5 commentators, but it's all the commentators, and it's all the midrashim, and all of the links into the Talmud and the Zohar. That exists. That's out there. Right now, you have to be a great scholar to really get into it and appreciate it. We think it can be more accessible. We think that if we make it, a beautiful interface that lets you explore these things, more people, will want to do that, will be able to do that. So let me just step into some of the things that we've built already, and I'll try to highlight, Aharon, for you some of the things that are new that maybe you haven't seen recently. We've started focusing on Bereshit Aleph, the first chapter of Genesis. We've got this whole text right now in English in the JPS 1917, also thanks to Open Siddur for getting that text from JPS in the first place. We spent some time formatting it to put it into here. We also have the Hebrew text, and it's a button click away to be able to get that, as well as being able to have a parallel side-by-side translation, English and Hebrew. And once this stuff is digital, once it's structured, you know what the verses are, how these things are broken up. You can play around with the layout. This becomes like an interactive kind of a thing. You can look at it however you want. I find one common mode here is like you're maybe primarily in English, but then you find that one line and you want to sort of click in and see, well, what exactly is that one word? So you can just flip for 1 second into the Hebrew, and you can see the original as you're looking. So everything here is about the interconnectivity as well, about seeing how commentators are talking about these texts, how the Midrash is reinterpreting the layer that starts off in Tanakh. And we want to sort of make that web clear for everyone, sort of let you really explore it. So anywhere in Sefaria, if you click and highlight a particular line of text, we can bring up and highlight all of the available sources that we have. And so we're pulling in from Midrash, we're bringing in commentators. We have, I think some people have started adding, we have this for the perplexed of the generation, or of Cook text, the guide for the perplexed. All of these guys say something about Genesis 1. So as long as we can start to get those texts, we can see what they say, then in one place you can sort of get all of these perspectives. You can be looking at Genesis 1 as your primary text, and at the same time, when something catches your eye over here, you can see in place, what does the Rambam say about this?
Just a question, just to help you through this. You're highlighting here. Is there any way that I can sync up or match to what you can follow along?
To be able to watch. Are you just trying? You could join the Hangout, in which case you would see my screen on your screen,
right,
if you wanted to. Okay. But otherwise, you can just click as you go. So these connections, they start to form a web, right? We're at one text right now, and we have a lot of sources available for Genesis, because that's been a natural place where people start to focus. But if you click in, all of these links of other text names are something that you can jump into. So you click on one of these particular links, and now you're in, the Midrash. And from there you see that this Midrash is in fact drawing on other sources from inside of Tanakh. So from there you can click onto another one, and then you find yourself in this web. Now we've clicked into Numbers, and we see that there's a reference from the Mishnah Sanhedrin into there, and you can just sort of start to click forever. You can start to feel like you're just moving along in this web between all of these texts and these connections.
So I have a question.
Yep.
Where's the Hebrew source?
If on the upper right-hand corner,
Oh,
you can see there are the three toggles. Yeah, so you can go into a Hebrew-only mode, you can go into the bilingual mode, or you can go into English, all in one spot.
And just these 2 pages is pretty radical.
Yeah, I mean, in some way, it's a natural extension
Right.
of everything in the tradition, right? I mean, in
Right.
some ways it's not that radical. It's just
No, it's not
we're
that
just taking it on, and the printed Talmud page has this sense of intertextuality. It's limited by space. There's only so many commentaries that you can fit in a particular space.
Right.
We don't have that problem in the new media context, right? On a computer, on an iPad, you can fit lots of things. You can also change what you fit depending on who you are or what you want to see. So, for example, just to bring us back to Genesis, this is something that after our last meetup, I got a lot of feedback about people wanting to know, well, how do I know what the different connections are? What's a commentary, and what's a quote, and what if I only want to see some of those things at once? So this is something I've built, but I'd love some feedback on the design of it because it's hidden right now. There's this hidden feature that if you click on the button that says how many sources there are, will bring out this menu. And this menu will let you filter the sources that show up. So if you know that you're only interested in learning, Torah with Rashi, plain old Torah with Rashi, you can see just Torah with Rashi. Or if you just want to focus on what does the Midrash say about this particular text, you get this as like another layer of commentaries on top of it. So there are all sorts of different ways to slice this, and you can sort of say, ideally, we have everything available. Everything's at your fingertips, and you get to choose for yourself what you want to see. Or maybe a teacher is choosing for you. Maybe as an educator, you are curating a set of sources and commentaries, and then saving that and offering it to your students, and say, here is my sort of lens into this text that I want to share with you, and we can look at it together. Right now, this works in 2 ways right now. Like there's sort of 2 sets of menus. One lets you filter by what kind of text the connection is. Is it actually a commentary text, or is it Talmud, Mishnah, Chassidut? And the other way is by the kind of connection. And these 2 things can be distinct, although I'm still working on how to best present this so that it's most clear. So sometimes there's, it's a quotation. It's about one text is taking another one and quoting it explicitly. Other times it's a type of commentary. Sometimes you might have something like parallel passages that you want to link, say that these things are connected in some way because they follow a parallel form. They're worth looking at together. So this is the other way of cutting up right now. We have like a few categories. We're still working on what are the right categories that make sense, but we have, like summary. So this Legends of the Jews, the Ginsburg text, is a summary of all of these other ones. Or, the quotations, these are the cases where explicitly one text is bringing in the Reshit and quoting it. There are other ways that we can cut this up. I think a number of people have suggested to think about this as by time period. To think like this is the first layer historically of texts that were written on top of the primary ones, and then it goes, through the ages, you get to the modern times, so you could almost sort of feel like, someone gave me a great analogy of the old encyclopedias had the entry for the anatomy of a frog, where you had those transparencies, and you'd have the layers.
Right.
So you guys seen this?
Yeah,
So it's like
sure.
one layer is like the organs, and you layer that on, you see what it looks like, and then there's like the circulatory system. So it's a similar kind of thing here. We have like generations of scholars and thinkers layering on top of a primary set of texts, and each one kind of makes it more rich, more complete, whatever, and that's what we're seeing. So that's here. I need to think of a way to make this more, just like in the interface, I think more evident that you can do that. Because even since I've done it, people ask me, how do I do this? And they can't actually see. So that's something I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about like just, visually, where do I put that kind of those options so that they're available, but not, in your way when you don't want them.
Right. So what have you learned? What are suggestions that you've seen?
On the whole?
Well, on this timeline or this.
Yeah. So that was one of the big ones, that would be a really useful way to segment the different kinds of texts that you might want to look at. I mean, the other issue that we're really just dealing with here is that eventually, like right now, we have 47 sources that relate to Genesis 1:1, which is great. I think there are probably 1,000, if not more, so we're still working on getting them. But already this design is running into its limits, So the way it works now, you see them here, and you can keep scrolling, actually. And so all of these on the right are still related to Genesis 1. And at some point, I don't even know if you can get through all of them, actually. So we need ways to think about, like, if we can't show everything at once, how do we select what the default is, like what the first set of connections that we want to show, or just some kind of different visual layout that'll let you, when you have hundreds of these connections and you want to be able to sift through them, we need something better than that, than what we have right now on that front. So the other thing about all of this, which may not be clear to you, is that anyone can help get these texts in. This whole system is designed so that if somebody wanted to add one of these connections, they could do it. I could show you what that looks like. But if I click on this particular verse, if I know of a source that relates to it, in particular if I know of a source that we already have, all I need to do is start typing in what that source is. So let's just imagine that I knew that in Mishnah Brachot there was a particular Mishnah that had to do with that source. I've just typed in that citation. We have that text already, so we can load that text up here. We've got the Hebrew as well as the English. And if I click Save right now, that source will show up on the right. It'll be connected to the one that I've just added it to. So again, for the people, they think like the scholars that we're trying to reach, or the students of Torah who are engaged in this, if they're making those connections, if they're seeing those connections and they're learning, then it's a few clicks away to be able to save it in a place that everyone else can benefit from and everyone else can see. Similarly, so this is on connections, but also on just translations. So let me just open up like some of these texts, like in Genesis Rabbah, for example. We don't have all of the English necessarily. We're trying to get people to help us create translations that can be freely reused. So if you're in this interface, we see all of this Hebrew text. You can go into this menu, tells you about this text, where it came from. It also gives you the option to add a translation. And so when you click this button, everything is a little slow today, but have patience. We give you this interface where we show you the Hebrew text. We don't have a translation for the second paragraph of Bereshit Rabbah right now, but if you have some time, or your students have some time, and they can do that, then you come in here, you start typing, you hit save. It becomes part of this big network, and it helps to sort of grow out all these texts. We're just getting started now, but we're starting to see some people doing this. We're building this community of people who are actually contributing. In fact, somebody 34 minutes ago has been coming in and I believe adding Hebrew names. This page shows all of the recent activity. So it shows the people who are the contributors, who are the people who are doing it. This week we've had all of these people come in and make contributions. We've got this great list of, this.
We
Yeah.
That's on-
Yeah, everything I'm showing you right now is up on the website. If you go, it's called the recent activity. And in the upper left, there's a link for recent activity. So these people are coming in and helping out, adding all of this information. This is actually really great. This guy is really fixing things up. We didn't have all of the Hebrew names of a lot of texts because we started off just basically with me typing things in. It was harder for me to type Hebrew. I didn't always have those Hebrew names. But we have a page that summarizes all of our texts here, where whenever there's a particular Hebrew text that we don't know the name of, just trying to find one of those examples, because these are all actually finished, which is great. But here, so I think that person who was just online 34 minutes ago is clicking this button, and he knows the answer. He knows how to type in the Hebrew name of these various texts, and bit by bit, he can fill in this information for us.
So the assumption is that when these translations are made, that they're open to interpretation. There's no editor.
There's no one editor.
There's no one editor.
The community as a whole can serve as an editor. In that, because everything is public, we keep a record of who did what and exactly what they did. People who become more involved, so far, people like me. So I'm trying to get back to this page. I keep tabs on this page, so I'm seeing day by day what people are doing. And if somebody comes in here and makes a translation that I think is just absolutely horrible, I'm going to edit it out. I'm going to say this isn't any good. If somebody does something that's really wrong, our hope is to build that sense of community, that people are collectively taking responsibility for this developing in a good direction. This is how Wikipedia works, right? That people, they just watch the changes, and you subscribe to particular things that you know about. You say, this is a topic I know about, I subscribe to the changes, and I watch. If something happens that's not good quality, then people jump in. This is how it works right now. I do think that we will move in a direction of having a little bit more structure, a little bit more review, so that things aren't just live on the site immediately, but that changes are made and then other people can come in and vet them and say, okay, this looks good to me, or it looks like this needs a little bit of work. And a simple system would be, one person can make a contribution and two people approve it. It goes live onto the site. Because this is all recorded too, we're in a good position to know, something about how reputable different people are. If somebody has been contributing to the site for a really long time and nobody ever complains, they probably are a good contributor. Right. If somebody just showed up yesterday and is doing all sorts of strange things, then we might treat them a little bit differently. So we can start to build a sense. We already sort of have these numbers here of tracking how active people are already. Right. This gives you a sense of who are the most active contributors. Right. But we can start thinking about that in terms of trust as well. That maybe if you're active, but other people, revert your changes frequently, then that might not look quite as good. Let's see, wow, this guy's really adding all this Hebrew. It's really fantastic. And then you can see other things that are happening, right? That people are coming in, adding the text of Genesis Rabbah been happening. This morning, I think this person is a student here, Yoni. I saw him post somewhere. Oh yeah, so he has been adding and translating text from the Shulchan Aruch as of today. That's great. Like this is what we're trying to do. Trying to see if we can get, we don't need 1 million people, but if we could get like 200 people around the world who were really committed to doing this kind of work, who enjoyed this kind of work, and felt like it was good to get it out there. I think with that level of number of people, we would really be making a lot of progress. We could be starting to really be generating something new that didn't exist before, and having it all be open source, publicly licensed, and reusable.
Associates, like what you can do when you have all this data in one place.
Yeah.
Have you introduced this to schools that you
Not,
the Heschel School, for example?
I mean, we're really, like, just now, we've been developing and
Right.
building kind of like online contributors,
Right.
and we're just now trying to sort of like take it to the road, and
Yeah.
really actually bring it. But it is one of a handful of areas that we think has a lot of possibility. Or maybe I'll just step back. We did have this great case about a month ago in a day school context where, without my knowledge, a teacher in LA found Sefaria, thought it was cool. He was teaching Tanakh, and he assigned his entire class to find the most interesting commentators that they could find and translate them and add them to Sefaria. So I think they only spent maybe like 3 or 4 days in total looking at this. But the result is that we have now this like richly annotated chapter. That this one chapter actually has, I don't know, 32 different sources. How many different, from these 4 different commentators, and this is now available to everyone. So that class like got to have that sense that they were working on something which was an assignment. Apparently they really liked doing it, but the result is that this resource is now available for anyone else. So it's just this one chapter, but if you're really curious in this particular chapter, we have a great resource for it right now. So there's the technology side of this too, right? Is that we're building a database, and we're making it open source, and we're offering it as a platform for other people to build on top of. Is that we have a free API. We have a way that other software developers can reuse our work and make other kinds of applications. So we built kind of internally our first example of what you could do if you have all Jewish texts available in a structured API, and that was this source sheet builder. We've definitely heard from plenty of educators that copying and pasting into Microsoft Word is a complete pain, that they have 18 different websites that they're looking at.
Right.
So we have the foundation to make something much better, much easier. In our source sheet builder, all you need to do instead of copying and pasting sources is cite them. You just say what you want to add, and then you can add it. So if you want to add, Genesis, say chapter 12, verse 5, don't even know what that is, maybe even through verse 8, you write down that citation, we have that text, you hit enter, and it's in your source sheet. It's in Hebrew as well as in English. It's digital, so you can very easily switch around the layout options, as well as if you want to stick with Hebrew only, if you want to go with English only, all of those things are possible. And then you get to, as you have multiple sources coming in, I'm just randomly choosing things here. You can move them around just by sort of dragging and dropping. So if you want to change the order, you can as well edit any of the text that we bring in for you, so that you can say that this should be, emphasized here, that this is bold, or a lot of the times let's say I'm bringing in a page of Gomorrah, and if we have one with English, the whole page is kind of huge, but I actually just want to focus on a particular part. So, I trim out and say, okay, that's the sugya that I'm looking for in the Gemara. It's still cited, it still sort of links out to where it came from. And you see I've opened up, we have a few, hopefully a growing number of public source sheets that people make and then they make available for anyone else. So I'm looking at some of them. I'm going to forget about what I was just making. But once you make a sheet like this, it's not, source sheets, there's some sense in this they're a dead end, because you have this piece of paper, but it's just a little snippet. You don't get the whole context. You don't get everything else out of it. A digital source sheet like this that's linked into the sources is, it's like the springboard, right? That you see this, okay, here, these 2 verses have been quoted here with certain questions, but like, what's the context? So you can click into it, and you can get it, right? You can see immediately what came before, what came after. In as much as we have other commentaries available, those become available to you too, so it starts to be like this jumping off point for looking into much more things. Source sheets, it's also, I mean, I think for us, it's like there's something strategic about it that we want, we're trying to figure out how do we encourage people to translate a little bit of the Mishnah, translate a little bit of the Gemara, and make it available to the world. As an educator, in the moment that they're making their source sheet, is kind of, they're ripe for doing that. They're doing that anyway, a lot of the times, right? When they can't find a good translation from the Gemara, they'll translate a few lines, no problem, for their source sheet. They give it to their students, but then it sits, in a Microsoft Word document on their hard drive. It doesn't go anywhere. Right. So from here, that one little piece that you do, it might not seem like such a big deal, but if everyone starts doing it, if all of those little pieces start to add up, then you can imagine that we can, start to be making progress.
Again, I guess the questions like translation. You as the editor of this engine.
Yep.
How does that kind of impact, or how does that factor into your editorial vision with source material? When is there a source sheet that it just says this? Where is this going? Either is this learning is taking us into a direction that's just really problematic. Something like a rotate, the idea of finding justification to pursue someone for the sake of killing someone. Those kinds of ethical quandaries.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm understanding you right, on one level, I think we just have to dive in and confront these things. And I think there's no sense in hiding our own sources or in thinking that something shouldn't be made translated or accessible because we're afraid that someone might misinterpret it. And I think a lot of people have had that attitude.
Yes.
And I think we're growing out of it. I think that we are maturing to the point where we don't have to be afraid of what our own sources say.
Right.
And the better attitude is to say, great, if something's controversial, something's potentially dangerous, let's put it out there and let's annotate it. Let's connect it to the sources. Let's keep it in context so that people can actually see what it is. On translations more generally, this whole platform, I'm trying to think. I'm not sure I have a good example of a place, but it is built to hold multiple versions. We don't just want one translation of Tanakh. We want every translation of Tanakh to be able to live here side by side, connected in, so that you can see and compare what they look like. And this, you can see it here, but right now this is about this particular text. This is coming from JPS 1917. If we have other translations, then in this menu you'll see those options. They show up here. And so you might be able to look at this one translation and see we have 3 other translations that are available as well. And go ahead and pick which one you want to look at. Because we can support multiple translations, we can allow, we don't have to reconcile every different point of view. We don't have to have everybody agree on a particular translation. There comes a point where we say, this translation is not incorrect, I just don't like it, so I'm going to make another one, and I can create an alternative. And you can start to see, maybe that these translations are kind of branching apart from one another, and you can see what are those, key points or moments where people disagree so strongly that they feel like it deserves an entirely different edition of that text to reflect that. And again, we can try to sort of capture that, algorithmically, in the sense that we make it easy to branch and make changes. But then we can also track and see, okay, well, which one is more popular? Say, which one do people prefer to see as their default? And we can show that text first while still making the other ones available.
Does anything like this exist in the Christian world of sources? Because the Vatican done, and
I've seen a handful of like basically like kind of Bible reader apps that come out of the Christian world. Some of them are pretty cool. I mean, I think some of them have like a pretty nice interfaces. I don't know that much about Christian texts, but I haven't seen. They tend not to go that far out. They tend to be really kind of about the Bible, and that's it,
Right.
as far as the ones that I've seen, at
Right.
least. So I don't really know sort of what are the other bodies of literature that surround,
Right.
sort of Christian readings of the Bible.
Right.
So I guess I just don't really know.
And, in the open source community, I think the closest comparison that isn't really secular, it's inclusive of many other types of books. For example, Wikisource.
Mm-hmm.
It's a site called OpenScriptures.org. They have a manuscript repository where their concern was basically hearsay. There's multiple hearsays of the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know what God's word is, knowing that there is multiple manuscripts.
Right.
So, how can we look at different directions? Looking at other related projects, for example, the evolution of Darwin's Origin of the Species. People had gone through all the different versions, digitized them, and then shown like how things have changed. They did something very similar with digitized versions. But the particularly Jewish idea for engaging texts is what is here reflected in the evolving design of this tool.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a kind of design that you won't see in the other communities and other open source communities are crafting tools for their communities.
Mm-hmm.
This is very big. This is really,
That's the reaction we're looking for.
this is
I think you can get grandiose about it if you forgive me for a moment. This is going to happen somewhere. We're hoping that we're really pushing it forward, but if we are not successful, somebody else will pick up what we've started and continue it. And this is like a real kind of moment of a shift in the way that we are able to relate to our texts as a whole, and actually sort of see them all not as a bunch of different books on the shelf, but as just one conversation that has happened over thousands of years with thousands of different voices. But they're all sort of speaking in the same place. They're all in the same context in one way or another. And I mean, I think, really it's like the moment of the redaction of the Talmud was sort of a big shift in the way that we took our learning and we took our ideas and we gave them a certain form, which has, hence informed the way that we interact with them. The movement into this sort of digital age is going to be just as significant, if not more so, than that. Once it's fully realized, once all of this is really here, and we feel like we are able to really, dive into it completely.
And by the way, once you start to conceptualize the canon as a set of conversations that exist in one space,
right.
You can say, why does that conversation have to have ended?
Right.
If the conversation continues,
Right.
And you can add new voices, and have a space that is like you can think about the Talmud as like a piece of social media.
Right.
Well, it's a Facebook feed. It's a bunch of people talking to each other across generations.
Right.
And what happens when you say we can still keep talking?
I think that's why this is so important, because while there were attempts to do something like that, to say this engaged tradition, it can meet the digital age, it will meet the digital age. Those projects, well, they were few and far between, but the ones that preceded Sefaria was Tactile, sponsored by JTS, right before its lockdown. right before its financial offer. And so Tag to Knock wasn't an open source project in Michelle, but people were deeply, deeply engaged and already, they didn't care whether it was closed source, open source, or whatever, it was something that was working for them, and they could start putting their commentaries out that other people could read and track their own insights into the Torah. And it's all in a database and suitable for them reviewing their own insights. Terrific. But then Michelle, with this being an open source project, it's very critical to understand it's the licensing that allows us to be sort of future-proof. Even if, God forbid, something happens to Sefaria, the database is already licensed in a way that others can build on top of this work, carry it forward, move it forward. And I have some questions about that actually for the community that you're generating.
Yeah.
I'm really encouraged. But I'm wondering to what degree your community are screen scraping other projects. Not a problem for it being the wiki source.
Yeah.
Although it would be lovely if semantic data that sometimes is in the wiki source project.
Yeah.
But if it's like, say, from .co.il,
We have been given explicit permission to copy from .at.
that's
said,
news.
I need to post this to our mailing list. Actually, yeah, we got Rav Yehoshua Kahani's working in Jerusalem. He had a meeting with one of them. They told him that basically the understanding of copyright that we were just talking about on the list, that these are public domain sources, even if they're digital, you can't copyright the public domain Hebrew source. They said, we agree with that interpretation of the copyright law. We do not believe that we have any authority to tell you not to copy our texts. Bavakasha.
Well, this is great, you know, because I don't believe that some people will immediately buy in. I want them to. I want them to. They need the proof of concept before them. They need to see people getting excited before them for themselves, for their own eyes to open to the possibility. I want Rav Steinsaltz to say, hey, look, you know, the punctuation for the Talmud, that's, you know, that's yours.
Right.
That isn't something that I am, well, it will only have to be in Steinsaltz's Talmud. It's like, you know, this punctuation is useful for everyone. It needs to be disseminated, digitized. And non-proprietary, I've had apps in open source applications. On any platform.
But I mean, to your original question about, you know, what if contributors are copying, you know, copyrighted material? I mean, on one level, we are you know, protected by the DMCA laws. That we are accepting user uploaded content, and it's not actually our responsibility to check every time if it's copyrighted or not, so long as we respond to takedown requests. So I think we are being proactive. I mean, there was one case I saw from the Sonsino Gomorrah that we took down from the site, but otherwise we actually don't have to do that until Sonsino asks us to. And as long as we respond in a timely manner to any of their requests, we are legally in the clear for copyright in those cases.
Something we haven't talked about since we last spoke online. Just for your sake, the issue is with Sonsino, you know, they're not an American press, they're an English press. They publish the Talmud. Most of it, Sonsino Talmud was published in the Netherlands before and after World War II. Some parts of that Talmud that were published before the war would be in the public domain in the United States, except for Copyright Act of 1996. Moved material that would be public domain back out, especially those that were published in other countries. The question was, well, for an internet website that theoretically locate itself outside of the United States, right? Under what jurisdiction would it need to honor specific national copyrights? For say Santino, in particular works that unquestionably in other countries are in public domain, just not in the United States. And
Because again, our approach for now, we're treating it as copyrighted. Because Josh had a nice conversation with somebody in their office when they very clearly said, yes, we believe this is still copyrighted in the United States, even though we haven't enforced that copyright.
when was that?
Last year.
Last year?
Okay, so that was what I heard last. That was what I heard. From
Okay, yeah. That's where we stand.
But you were looking on this trip to find.
I was hoping to. Yeah, I haven't found a contact. I think it's probably not going to happen on this trip, but at some point we want to have that conversation. Right? We think there's got to be some way that they can be given an incentive to just let go, just let everybody do sort of what they're doing. And we're happy to work with publishers in some ways to be able to offer kind of opportunities for branding or linking out to their online stores to drive sales. We don't know exactly what we have to offer them right now. We're still very small. We're just getting started. If we get more traffic, we might have more to offer in those cases. But our goal is to make these things available for free for reuse. We don't have to crowdsource it. We don't have to ask 1,000 people to volunteer. That's a place that we have some sense of power. That's something that we can do. Nobody can stop us. We don't have to ask anybody's permission. We can just start doing that work, and the result is good. But if Steinsaltz in particular, if they think that there's some arrangement that they'd like to come to, where we can make these texts available, then we will jump at the opportunity.
Please.
I have a question just about sources, this linear translations of commentary based on the text.
Mm-hmm.
What about secondary articles? I'm thinking about J-Store, for example. This whole terrible tragedy of sports and how that impacts on this network. But I want Judith Plasko. I want, for example, the Jewish Light series.
Ultimately, the hope is all of that is on this platform.
All of it.
Right, so the future is, everybody knows this. It's not going to be a wall.
It's all going to be on a tablet.
That's right. And the question is, how do you navigate all of those texts in the tablet? We want this to be a space for all texts that have something to say in the Jewish conversation, in the greater Jewish conversation, and can be tied together. That's the long-term vision.
And I think in the steps in between, I think there are some cautions and considerations, just in terms of we'd like to focus on the foundation of Torah texts that are uncontroversially Torah texts. We don't want this to have a denomination. We don't want it to be acceptable to some people, but other people think that's just not a place for me to go. We want everyone to think that this is just Jewish texts, and it's something that cuts across everybody. So we want to get everything, but we also kind of want to have some sensitivity to making sure it's the kind of space where everyone can feel safe. They can feel like the Torah texts that they know and love are there, and they don't have to feel like other viewpoints are imposed upon them. I was going to say, ultimately, we want to expose everybody to lots of new points of views and get these conversations happening across different communities.
Right.
But at the same time, we don't want this to be something that's a liberal tool. We want this to be something that is Torah text, that everybody who is interested in learning Gemara will think this is a great way to learn Gemara, and not have to sort of have a lot of other reservations about it.
So I guess the question is so what are the what are those boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, does the boundaries encompass the modern movements,
Mm-hmm.
or is it a tool just for the Tsuda-minded people,
Mm-hmm.
or does it go beyond it to the Schweiz?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it goes beyond. It's just that we have to give people sort of those options. That it's something that you can kind of opt into. That when you come to the site, it's not going to give you those viewpoints until you click the button that says, "Let me see," the modern Jewish thinkers from this school.
If you log into Twitter, right, you can choose whether you're going to follow Pope or
Right.
Lindsay Lohan. And they all exist in the Twitter universe, but you choose which are the voices that you're listening to.
Yeah.
And I think that's the model this is going to go towards. Who are you following, right?
Who do you trust? Who do you want to hear from?
It's funny. I have contributors on OpenSea,
Mm-hmm.
and we have placeholder. Like the site right now is a placeholder for the application. But I've made the site something that is the least like what I would like your site to become.
Mm-hmm.
Where users do feel like they are represented, and contributors they have some kind of avatar representation. I was thinking about some of our contributors are dead. They're in the public domain. We treat them just as living contributors. So, in order for people to choose from a collage of different contributors, they're clicking on avatar links to, say, Fanny Noida, an author in the 8th century, German Themis, a dictionary of prayers, or Rabbi Yochanan.
He's a contributor.
Yeah, so all these people are contributing. I'm thinking that in the layout, I guess the problem is if there's so many different contributors, and I was thinking about this when I was first trying to imagine a user interface for it. I'm thinking about the scaling problem. I was thinking people would subscribe to RSS feeds of certain contributors, and those whatever changes to or whatever core source that they're looking at, those feeds would be populating their screen and their content. They could always uncheck those contributors. They can always check those. They could always have that option. So it is kind of like Twitter followers, but with Twitter followers, it's chaotic. It's one big stream of data.
Yeah.
And I think in the scale that we're talking about for Sefaria, and I'm also really leapfrogging with your development. Awesome. I feel like if we had some screen with the core content, and it's Tanakh, and it's in English or French or whatever language is supported yet, all those subscribed contributors or all those followed commentators could be arranged. There might be a limit to how many different areas it could be arranged around the screen.
Yep.
Just like in the Vilna edition of the Talmud, there's a certain amount of commentary space. Maybe that could be scaled to the screen size. Like if you have a whiteboard size screen,
you can see everything. Yep.
I got to catch a 9:30 train. Yep.
That's good. I'll see you in the morning.
Okay. No, I'm
You're
gonna have
running.
to really sprint.
Yeah. Good luck.
Go downhill, run down.
Run down.
Don't go up 16.
I was gonna just try and find a cat actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe it's part of that.
Good meeting you,
It's
Josh.
nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice meeting you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice to meet
It's
you.
impossible to see this and hear about some of the scalability and layout problems we're trying to
Mhm.
imagine solutions. But
I mean, I think one of the big solutions, I mean, even that we have already, it's not
Yeah.
working so well, but it's just that it's not static, right? It's not about one layout that has everything available. Like here, as soon as this loads, I mean, so this layout shows some set of commentaries. All of these happen to be related just to the first verse because we have so many of them. But you can, by signaling your intent, by clicking on the second verse, you can bring up something entirely different. So now the layout's changed. Not the primary text, but what's on the side has changed. So you can sort of like have ways. The very first version of Sefaria just did that by just the mouse movements, actually. So you didn't actually click, but just as you moused over the different parts of the text, the sidebar was moving and changing all the time. As well, I mean, I think they're probably, like, just as far as the layout goes, like, I think we'll need to have some sense of, being able to expand the stuff in place. That this is what you can see, this is what fits for right now, but then maybe there's like a little icon that's like ... 100 more, and you click into that icon, and then you can sort of start to navigate all of the other connections that are available in that space, connected just like the first verse.
the other users that have been attracted to the project,
Mhm.
to a degree, are they interested in philological problems?
Mm-hmm.
Like this other group, Open Scripture Settler,
Mm-hmm.
very much like Solomon chapter, the type of scholars that came here to JTS 100 years ago, they were very interested in like what is the accurate or earliest manuscript version. And
Yeah.
there's like multiple variations of the Talmud. There are variations in the Tanakh itself.
Right.
How are those Gearsort differences
Yeah.
being reflected and expressed?
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of we figured, okay, we have to solve this through TEI, but you figured out another solution.
Well, I mean, I think I should say the real answer is it just hasn't come up that much yet. Like, I know it's an issue. It's sort of in the back of my mind that I know we really have to confront these things eventually. But I think, honestly, my approach is let's get something that's like good enough for most people and roll with that first. And I want to solve those problems, but I'd be concerned that if I tried to solve that problem from day one, it would just slow everything down quite a lot. And I think there are a lot of people who are concerned about these differences between different traditions and manuscripts, but there are a lot more who really don't even know that much about it, and it isn't actually that big of a concern for them. So I think right now we're sacrificing some sense of accuracy for the sake of progress, for the sake of having something. And most of our contributors, most of our users are just really excited that we have something. They're not complaining about those issues. Technically speaking, we have, this system is great. It already is capable of handling multiple versions of texts. So in theory, we can handle some variations, except that we right now depend upon having a single structure for the text. So it's no problem if we have slight variations across a book in the Tanakh, so long as they all have the same number of verses and chapters. And if one of them has, one extra verse in a particular place and the other one doesn't, right now that's a problem. We can't really scale to accommodate that. And I think we will, but I think it's not my top priority, because I think there's so many more things we can do that are making more text available, that are exciting, that just don't depend upon solving that problem.
There could be like a hyper scholar section
Mm-hmm.
of addressing those particular issues
Yeah.
of these deer sellers, like the World Book Encyclopedia, versions of different interpretations, the subset.
Yeah.
And that, I think their faculty here, for example, Judith Kaufman, faculty, and Marjorie Lehman, there's a lot of work with technology, basic technology. Would be really interesting observers. I mean, look, you have the world of I hope the receptivity, I'm sure there's great excitement.
Yeah.
So it's very exciting because I myself, am always struggling with this business of the shelf. I want to start in my books. And how do you begin to, one assumes when one has reached, I guess, a critical threshold where one, I guess, is given you or forbidden coordination, assumes that you want to take it to access all these sources.
Yeah.
In fact, it's Google time.
Right.
It's really Google time, the tyranny of time.
Yeah.
And then this is done in such a way that gives such integrity, along with scholarship and access, which is Torah for everybody. I mean, that's a very. So let me ask you, may I just ask just because there's an expression in Hebrew, aim come up in Torah, there's no flower. I mean, in terms of you're pitching this in terms of its content, but I'm sure you're also thinking about funding. Is that?
Yep. I mean, that's what we're turning to right now.
Right.
I mean, like I said, our story is Josh and I were talking about this as an idea, wasn't really going anywhere. This Jewish New Media Innovation Fund was launched through big philanthropies trying to fund new media projects.
Right.
This is how we really got started, is by applying for that grant right up front. At that time, we were two guys with an idea. We didn't have anything to show. That was early 2011. So at that time, we don't really have background in the Jewish world, in education, in Torah. So we were just sort of two guys with an idea. We didn't get the grant, and I think from that experience as well, from talking to a bunch of other foundations at the time, just sort of realized that we needed something to show for ourselves, that this idea doesn't work on paper. But we were pretty sure that if we could just show it, if we could actually say, look, this is what we're talking about, then we might be in a different position. So we've just been, mostly me, I've just been building it since. And I do freelance work, so I'm able to sort of have a flexible schedule, sometimes have more blocks of time that I can devote to it. Other times don't have to be working on other things full time. So I've managed to find time to just push working on it. Now that we have something that is relatively complete as far as a site goes, it makes sense. People can stumble on it into the internet, see what it is. Now that we have a growing number of contributors, that we can kind of address this concern that we can actually get traction, we can produce texts out of a system like this. Now we're turning back to funding. And so that's really the main purpose of this trip for me here to New York. We're talking to a number of foundations and individuals. What we'd like to do, ideally, is that we get enough funding for 2 people to be working on this full time. For me to be really focusing on developing the code and the product and the experience, and then to have another person come on board who is more, inside the world of Torah learning, more of an into institutions in Jewish education, and somebody who can really kind of be on the ground, pushing the kind of partnerships and deals that we think we need to really kind of motivate groups of people to contribute.
So I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Please.
There is a master educator who just was in Israel. He was a graduate. He was the head of a school at the Hesher School. You may know him,
Sure.
Rabbi Dover. He also just received a PhD.
Okay.
Now, Dov one of those people who kind of, in this very interesting way, is able to kind of cross lots of boundaries. He's the dean of Jewish studies at Bachelor School, which is
Yep.
community school. He's a YU graduate. He's also a JTS graduate.
Yep.
So here's a guy who just knows sources so well,
Yeah.
and he is also an educator.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what it would mean, and maybe you've gone through these kind of trial runs, is that, let's say for the educator, for the delivery, the master teacher, how does this work for him? How does this space work for, let's say, Eliezer Diamond, who's a professor of codes here at JTS? How does this work for, the rabbi on the run, as it were, trying to, access and put together lesson plans that may address a particular issue?
Yep.
And how might this work for, the relative, the Jewish lights consumer, somebody who's a novice but is, interested?
Yep.
And how do you bring those? And maybe you've done this, in terms of bringing that focus group together to begin to kind of figure out how this site can be accessed.
Yeah.
Have you done that already? Is that?
We need to do more. We've done some. I mean, we've done a lot of just talking to educators, lots of different people to sort of get their take on it. We need to do more of that kind of like on the ground type work. I mean, I think our thinking is, for a certain kind of high level of scholar, those people tend to be very busy. They tend to be involved in a lot of other projects already. They might not be the best profile for somebody who's going to sit down and contribute a lot of work to our site directly.
Right.
Source sheet builder is a big in for there. That's something that one example of something that we feel like we're trying to solve a pain point for existing Jewish educators.
Right.
And if we can get them on board, they start using it, hopefully it's just better than their alternatives, that they prefer using it to Microsoft Word. It makes their process faster. They get a better looking, more functional result. And in the process, they might be contributing, say, translations or adding some new text that don't exist in the system as they go. But they're also serving as a promoter, right? So in some ways, the educators, the higher level educators, their role might be mostly just to be using the system in a way that introduces it to all of their students.
Right.
That all of their students receive that source sheet, and then they might be the ones who are really more likely to be able to have a little bit of extra time, spend time on the website, working with it. Same sort of, I think, for the sort of the Jew Light idea is that this, I think, our first target audience is the kind of Jewish educator that can use this as a resource, and then they serve as the ambassador to their students, their community. Maybe it's just introducing their students that this exists. So now some people are browsing our site that didn't know about it before. That's useful also. Or maybe they are, ideally, and this is what I was talking with Barry, one of the things I was talking with Barry Holtz about today, is like, well, what would it take for us to convince some part of JTS, some class in JTS, that it was like a requirement of their learning, that there had to be this byproduct, that if you're learning this particular text, at the end of the semester, I don't know if you have semesters here exactly, your class should be responsible for having annotated that parak of Gemara that you just learned together. And that should be seen as like part of, almost like an obligation of the learning process, that it's not just interior, it has effects, outside of just your own personal
Did Barry mention Walter first?
No.
I mean, here's another individual. He teaches Parshanut. And he's studied with Leibowitz, and he's just one of these extraordinary. Did you study it? A little bit. Yeah. So, he's another, I think, just a very helpful resource.
Is he here?
Yeah. I mean, he's not. I mean, we're in between semesters, so.
He's a student in the hallway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it? Is he related to someone else?
Yeah, his brother.
Mhm.
But anyway, I think there are a number of faculty
Yeah.
who would be so excited.
Yeah.
And they already know Robbie Harris,
Mhm.
Luke Parshan, who's a Bible scholar. I mean, there's a whole list of people.
Mhm. I mean, one other thing for scholars,
Yeah.
if some of these scholars have translations that they've created already, and if they're excited about the project,
Right.
they can publish them on Sefaria.
Right.
They can get their content inside, interconnect with
Right.
everybody else. If it's their own work and they
Right.
don't have a publisher that has some copyright stake, it's just a matter of them saying, yes, I want to do this. I release it to the world with a Creative Commons license.
The other people to talk to would be, let's say, I'm just thinking within the umbrella of the conservative movement, would be, let's say, some master teachers who work with adult education. For example, Gordon Tucker. There are a number of, there's one of our faculty members, Sarah Calvert, whose thesis was on adult best practices in adult education. And, that would be another part of a weekly Parshanut class or Parshat Shavua class that would be able to incorporate, use this as a platform and really actively engage.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what you're trying to.
Yeah.
There's also a really good book by Harvey Fields. I don't know whether you're familiar with Harvey Fields, but he was a Reform rabbi who put together a 3-volume set of Parshat Shavua. And so he would have the text in translation. He would then have a summary. Then he'd have Parshanut. And then he'd have some essential questions. It's just sort of an interesting kind of template that exists. That I've always used that as a resource.
Yeah.
But this allows is just we want to create new templates.
Yep.
And to play with them. Anyway, I
So the first person mentioned Dove.
Dove Luria, Lerea.
Okay.
He was the director of Kibbutz, which is a gap year program that's in Israel, but he's now coming back to the United States. He's just a very gifted interpreter of text. He spent years, cutting and pasting and working with lessons and his Torah knowledge. I mean, he's really good. I work with him.
Yeah. Yeah, great. So, I mean, again, I see a lot of this in our future of just talking to everybody. I think we have something that when we show it to people, anyone who cares about Jewish text tends to get pretty excited about it. And I think, there's like an online component to this, that this could just spread sort of by itself on the internet, but we really think we want to have an on-the-ground component.
I mean, that would be helpful to you, and I'm sure, and there could be any number of people like myself who could say, we could bring together different focus groups to begin to address some of these questions that you may have, or conversation.
Yeah.
Whether they're day school teachers, whether it's Shoshana Jetwab, or whether it's Fagan. I mean, there's just a really powerhouse group of day school educators sitting there.
Yeah.
But then you have faculty here. I mean, those are two. And then you have, some adult learner teachers and community. Very.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brett, do you think you're past the stage of adding seeded content as you've gone to the next stage of we have our seeded content enough for a proof of concept. We're graduating.
What is it?
Sefaria is graduating to another level of it. We have a tremendous amount of user contributed.
We don't have a tremendous amount of user-generated content. We have.
What is it in percentage to the initial seeded?
In terms of total percentage of text, it's a very small percentage, really. I mean, but the reason is because we've been able to get a ton of text by just copying from Wikisource primarily and other sources, and there's still more to do in that front. I mean, basically, most of the biggest primary Jewish Hebrew originals are available now that we can copy from Dot as well. So there's still places just like the Mishnah Torah. We can get the whole Mishnah Torah from Wikisource with a little bit of effort on my part. The Shulchan Aruch as well. So there's still a few big core originals, a lot of the Midrashim too. I mean, Wikisource is great. They're huge, so we still haven't finished sort of processing all of that. And then the user-generated content tends to be what makes it more interesting, right? So we don't necessarily get all those interconnections just straight out of Wikisource. But users are really helpful for that. And they're helpful because they work in networks. It's like by translating only a page or a paragraph here and there, it can still be very relevant when it's linked into all of these other different things. So I could run a query in the database to actually get you a real number, but in terms of like characters of text that we have from users versus from other pre-existing sources, it's only a small amount right now.
I think it's really cool. I'm seeing something actually similar to Wikisource, not the part of Wikisource which is transcribing from an image of some scanned text. I kind of would like to see that too.
Yeah.
So that the integrity of the sources at Sefaria are for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we'll need to do that.
And for me, the biggest news is hearing that has been amenable.
Yep.
Just historically, it's history. We're the first group that I called them in 2009. The consider was publicly launched.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And they had a different opinion at that time?
Yes.
I mean, I know they have copyright notices on all their pages.
Yeah, but the conversation was, I was glad, I was really grateful that we had the conversation. Because they could have just said no.
Yeah.
It's really fun. But we had a conversation and it was and that might have been because the consider is Tefillah is flavored by denominational streams. All the issues of categories being reflected when it comes to Torah, it's not as if there are different ways of doing Torah, but it isn't like people have created denominational identities around the way they learn Torah. So it's a great, that's why Sefaria is a great unifier in a way that we're worried about. I want to hear your question. But in terms of the technical question about dot, what they've done on their site is something very interesting. Something I would like to see move on to Sefaria and other, I think, the most valuable thing. It's like core coding. They've done like some tagging
Yeah.
of their text.
Yeah.
I saw that in the cut and paste.
So she.
Yeah, it's that source sheet was immediately recognized.
Yeah.
That's dot.
Yeah.
Like that tagging of semantic data into colors is really, really like useful.
What exactly do they? What are the color codes?
I think like some.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. Like here, I could tell that like some of the color codes indicate dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's stom is in black.
Mm-hmm.
But when somebody is speaking in a voice, that is in another color.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes those colors that you're speaking are different. And I don't know all this course, but somewhere on their site that's there. And that
So that probably is under copyright. Right?
really.
I mean, I guess it's arguable. I don't know what they would say, but that is, that color didn't exist in the original Hebrew text. That was something that they decided to add in there. It's like a kind of formatting.
My thinking is this. Like, as far as I know, I mean, it's really a differently related to copyright in general. Because we could say, look, copyright doesn't actually cover colors of the text. But I have a relationship with this person, and that's going to supersede what's illegal.
Right.
Just like the conventions of scholarly institutions, museums, and libraries supersedes for many of what they're allowed to themselves, regardless if it's in the public domain or not. There is a C-door called the Polychrome Historical Critical. Jacob Friedman, Dr. Jacob Friedman, created. He never was able to produce, but he did have that on. There's color coded for each historical period. Color coded with purchases. When Jules Harlow said in the journal article that he was interested in doing something similar, he threatened legal action. The question is whether that was that copyrightable or not. Is that or can we use different colors for that?
Right.
Like I was really excited to hear that was doing it because they went through that trouble. That's really, really good. They went through that trouble for looking for sources. So you have this whole problem. And really like I don't know if it's fun, but it's one of the things that we learned in a Talmud class is to make your Talmud into a coloring book.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody who learns Talmud learns Talmud.
Yes.
That's the life-changing thing.
Yeah. We've had the feature request that we should sort of build something around that very idea where it's like you take your page of Talmud and then you get to break it up and bold and highlight, put arrows, sort of do all the kind of visual work to make it your own and to sort of like show your understanding of the text.
Look, I really encourage that with the caveat of I really want the color coding. I believe that's captured entirely within old school HTML color tags, not like dynamically generated indexed text on the dot backend, all hand coded.
Yeah.
Like the kinds of technology that is HTML3 or 2.0, like that is like real hardcore digital age data that is, I think, ephemeral and endangered. Because that was a lot of hard work that they did, and it could be wiped away in a moment. So, and yours is the project that you like now I feel like you could put it present.
Yeah.
Like that is like maybe even more important than the text that's at dot. Like that work.
I mean, I think we will need to clarify. I didn't have this conversation with them.
Okay.
The premise of the conversation is we're not interested in your formatting. We're just interested in the text. Formatting can be copyrighted. Text cannot be copyrighted. They agreed that yes, that's our understanding of copyright law as well. So go ahead. I don't know if that includes color or not. Right? So let's figure it out. But yeah.
Wow, finally wall.
Yeah.
Anyways, 2 cents.
Yeah.
What were we going
No, I was, well, just a couple of things about this, the linear nature of the page.
Yep.
How the beauty of the traditions that all of these people come from different places in the world. And I don't know whether you were familiar with the Revson Foundation put together the Heritage Series, which was one attempt of creating some kind of CD-ROM around Jewish history.
Yeah.
And it was very cool.
Uh-huh.
And it didn't go very far because, it required people to pay for it, and it required some kind of teacher training.
Yeah.
But it would be an interesting guide just to look at how these pages, it's probably very old stuff.
So
about 10 years
layouts.
old now.
Yeah.
But when it came on the scene, the Revson Foundation put a lot of money into this heritage series. And, I think that that's always a very interesting vision. I'm a very visually driven person, and sometimes the text, I can see so much text, I really want to see, where's Rashi from, where's Rambam from, where's all these people.
It's a really cool idea.
To be able to connect the dots.
Where's it from? Like just like having bios, like information about them as people?
Well, information about them as people is fine. Like
to have a map.
It's part of it's a map. Did they respond to one another? Did Rambam comment on have things to say about text or this or that? Was there a dialogue? Kind of reading commentaries. I just don't know. It's huge.
Yeah. This is an area we've given this some amount of thought. We just don't know exactly when we'll get to it.
Yeah.
There's the 1906 Jewish Encyclopedia in the public domain.
Right.
So we've definitely kind of thought that maybe we'd use that to sort of like, seed all of this stuff that, you hover over Rashi and we can at least, bring up that information. If we have locations, doing things like putting it on the map is definitely easy, right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a nice sense too, like, we have this one page right now that's like an overview of all of the texts, but having that sort of like, bibliographical information about text as well, to sort of be able to see like, when did these things come and what is their shape and their form, kind of like, I think there's definitely something interesting about that, and I think definitely kind of like makes this more interesting for exploring if you feel like anytime you stumble into a place and you don't know what it is, that you can sort of ask, like, where am I? What is this text? Like, what's it all about?
And digitalization is so many things.